fiction. But in terms of something you could just sort of feed data into, it tended to be a pre-made narrative with gaps. This thing, allegedly, I haven't seen it work, but allegedly can really craft its own narratives. And I don't know if you can read the prose on the side there, but it's kind of curious. So the machine can enable it, but there's other ways we can use some of these same algorithms to actually enable people to do far more interesting things themselves. Not to present them with an old-style pre-made narrative, but actually to let people construct their own narratives, to put images together in their own way, to leave trails behind of the kinds of images they associated. So artists can work here in partnership with the public, and interactive and crowdsourced documentary projects, also fictional projects, are challenging the notion of authorship. I mean, that's one of the great challenges to, especially to artists. This challenges the notion of authorship. Who is the author here? Much like a video game, where many different paths are possible. Actually, you're looking at a collaboration between someone who builds an environment and the curatorial act of the user who assembles that environment, interacts with that environment in different ways. So the same blurring between producers and consumers that is terrifying in the business world is also still going on in the cultural world. And it's blurring the line between artists and their audiences. And the interesting forms that are emerging are really about collaborations between those artists and audiences. Not just, here it is, I'm the artist, take it, but here's a space where we can collaborate and share and co-create. Very same thing, we can see some of these new techniques in augmented reality in the world of storytelling. So a lot of AR, I mean, if you used it much, a lot of the apps are pretty much about branding, marketing, or whatever. But there are other great ways, and again, crowdsourced ways, to use this technology to tell stories. And this comes from our mobile experience lab, where we're working with, in this case, Italian Americans in Boston, to try to tell their life stories, the stories of immigration, of their families' experiences in the city of Boston, by appending data, photos, documents, information to location, so that anyone with an AR quick cell phone can walk through there and explore these public-driven narratives, these public-driven experiences, people who are making sense and meaning of space. And the Desserteau argument here, this really helps to make place into space, make map into the tour. A lot of the old binaries that Desserteau talks about, not that long ago, in the 80s, here get completely transformed with some creative appropriation. So we've had data and analytic tools, we've had techniques. Techniques now I want to look at some new tools and new opportunities for either exploiting people or intervening critically and having critical engagement. So there's some wonderful new tools. This scallop imaging camera is an ultra-cheap camera. The power of this thing is in its algorithm. Of course, the application is surveillance. You can do a lot. This thing has a remarkable 180-degree range with this ultra-cheap little set of lenses. Below it, you see Litro, or what used to be called refocus imaging. That's a dynamic image that allows you, the same image, I should have shown this in a dynamic state, you can shift the focus of the image. So when it's on your screen, you can, if you want to see what's on the other side of the raindrops, you just move the cursor and the image refocuses. All the light is there. All the information is in the image. The algorithm allows us to shift the focal length. One of the groups in the Media Lab at MIT has a camera that can, it's not on the market, but it will be soon, they say, that can see around corners. Again, the light, you can send a beam and refract what's back there. The information is there in the image, but we don't have the tools to pull it out. Well, that's where these new algorithms are being quite useful. So what do we do with these? Do we use these for surveillance and fashion imagery? Or can we repurpose this stuff and use it in a more creative way? The technology is neutral. The use is what makes the difference. Here's a really nice example of by public ad campaign. That's the name of the group, and Will Sherman in this case in New York. There's a lot of these kind of apps on the market right now. Here's an iPhone app by Mark Squarick and Joseph Hawking, The Leak in Your Hometown. And these things basically assume they use image recognition to do overlays. That raise some questions about dominant culture. And this is what I mean by cracks. It's not like capitalism and marketing are over, but you can have a lot more fun with it than you used to. And finally, the nature of art, the very nature of art, of the artist, of the relationship between the artist and public. These things themselves are sites of change. And again, we're coming at it from a tradition, we're coming at it from certain economic realities that want us to adhere to certain old forms, to the familiar, but we can see that these kinds of questions and demands to rethink the position a little bit. And this is a great, Franco, were you at the, this was a great way to sort of circumvent the fact that these kinds of artistic interventions are not yet officially recognized. Well, okay, let's make our own pavilion. Let's do it ourselves.
It's actually here in Istanbul.
Oh, it's here?
Yeah, we transferred that and they're doing 2 exhibitions at the same time. One is called Not Here in the US, and then they're doing with the same work, one in Istanbul, and it's called Not There. And it's just the empty gallery, and it just has been on since July 22nd, and the works are in the gallery, and we curated this one, and you can go into the gallery and you can actually see the artwork. So it's interesting, and we also tried to do something with Hagia Sophia, and but it didn't really work out. It's a too sensitive area.
Okay, great. Well, that's really wonderful. So I want to just run through a couple of quick words here, and I'll stop. I think curation is really becoming quite important as the act that actual audience members are starting to engage in much more. You can give them a lot of things, and they will assemble it and make something of it. They will select. Data crunching, these are all C's, I couldn't avoid the alliteration. Crunching data is really one of the, we have so much of our culture. Artwork has always been in conversation with the culture of the past, but we can now look at that culture in a new way. Now that we can sort of aggregate vast amounts of culture as data, we can see new patterns, new rhythms, and we can work with that stuff. Collaboration, I've tried to emphasize throughout this, is really an important new direction. A lot of interactive film examples are really good places to look for the kinds of collaboration between the filmmaker and the so-called the audience. Credibility is really important. What is the credibility? I mean, I raised it earlier. What's the credibility of art that takes these forms? That steps outside the traditional notion of the artist? It's bad enough when you're an electronic artist because it's already, credibility is already an issue compared to what painters and sculptors do. Because what's the there, and is this unique, and what's the market value? But as you start to push this into the algorithmic and partnerships with the audience, partnerships with the user, the notion of what is the notion of aesthetic credibility looms ever larger. And of course, there are some really big challenges, and the challenges are always opportunities. I'm just going to show a few quick ones. Big money is trying to make the best of social media. Social media is a threat, potentially a great threat to these industries, and they're spending whatever it takes to figure out how they work and to make good use of them. And Levi's, the Friends store is letting you use your friends to sell you the latest jeans, a Facebook type interface, and so they're building tools, and just as they're repurposing some other tools that are out there, we can repurpose these tools. I mean, it seems to me that's where the action is. It's about trying to hack these systems, not just hack these systems, but to learn from them as they're learning from us and push this into the next step. Data gathering, this is the Gatorade. Gatorade is a sort of Coke type product in the US. This is their mission control for social media. They track every mention of the competition and of their own brand to see if it's up or down in the Twitter world and Facebook and Googling or whatever. Very elaborate system, but think about what an amazing tool something like this could be to sort of play with cultural behaviors, to do artwork based on this kind of interaction with the culture, not just be sold things to it. I want to end on this really horrible image. This is a really egregious image. It would be really depressing if it weren't so terrifying. I've never seen the new order of things so explicitly depicted. The brain as putty between someone's fingers. And to think that all of this is graced by a reference to Aristotle. This is why art is more crucial than ever. This thing that you can probably read, this is what, increasingly the film industry is turning to this for predictions about what scripts to even put into development. Quantifiable, guaranteed. This is why art is more crucial than ever. The job of artists remains the same. We can change their definition, we can change the notion of art, but the job remains the same. To take the materials the culture provides and reshape them into something that shatters predictions and forces new ways of seeing and being in the world. So I think, okay, Grandma Moses couldn't end on that. Thank you very much. So probably a few minutes for questions.
Hello. I just wanted to complexify a little bit your analysis of the points of view in the Microsoft image synth program. It doesn't obliterate point of view in the sense of a point of view being a particular way of looking at the world, particular constraints on what is real and what isn't. Because all it's doing is normalizing all of the differences between a collection of images. So the individuality is actually completely lost from each point of view, made up of a kind of average point of view. It's actually pointing more towards kind of synthetic objectivity beyond point of view. But it isn't a real objectivity because it's always a point of view, a particular way of looking at the world.
So I push back on that a little bit in the following way. I think that would make sense from the old stance, the object-subject difference. And I think it's, and with the current state of their synth technology, which isn't so refined, we can still actually see the frame patterns of everyone's image. So you can actually look, just as you can pull back the wiki page, the Wikipedia page, and see who's tampered with what and done what. There's a way to sort of acknowledge still the unique bits of point of view. But I think much like Wikipedia, it's actually doing something a little bit different. It's stepping outside that old domain of authorship, and I don't think it's making a pretense for objectivity any more than Wikipedia does. It's dynamic, it's shifting, so I think it's actually, I would argue that it's kind of problematizing those old notions of objectivity. Precisely by, okay, but it's all about the gaps. So you can, if you're at Piazza San Marco and someone did a really close-up of a couple of tiles, you can zoom right in and see that, but you can't go left or right or up or down. So to me, what it does is create a kind of urge to see more. It's all about the limits of seeing in ways that normal photographs don't tend to do that to me. If I just saw the still photograph of the 2 or 3 tiles, I'd sort of think, oh, nice color symmetry and all that's interesting. Here, I want more and I can't get it. And that to me, so it's not just some objective rendering of the world. The subjectivities are all there, but what I see for the first time are the limits of those subjectivities. Just as with Wikipedia, I'll see a line and I'll say, yeah, but, and I'll peel back the page and I'll see that someone took out the but and there's fighting over the buts. So I don't know, it seems to me that these are making actually a process available. And again, I think most of us tend to, in my daily life, and I'm one of them, tend to just use this and look at it like I would look at anything else. And that's where the algorithmic layer is so insidious. It's not like it's ideology and it's a layer of false consciousness between me and the world, but it is an agency. And we don't have good language yet to talk about that agency, to talk about the contours of an algorithm, to talk about what it's actually doing. And so right now, I guess what, at least in my experience, these limits are all about raising questions about that. It provokes me to think of those questions and doesn't give me good answers. But it seems to me that as, my job in the academy is really to start developing a critical language to think about this so we can be articulate about this new relationship between me and the world. So that's why I don't think it's just like re-objectifying it. I think that's our stance. Our inclination is to go at it that way. But in fact, I think it's potentially doing something more complicated. Potentially.
There was something that actually I wanted to add to this, and it's interesting the word that you used, process. There seems to be like a fear of the process itself. I mean, one of the things that come to my mind I was working on a collection of digital art, and it was about historicizing it.